how do we know the truth without people? The Prophet ﷺ had a teacher, and that's one of the great wisdoms of our tradition, is that تَعَلَّمْهُ شَدِيدُ الْقُوَّةِ, that he himself was taught by Jibreel, and Jibreel was less than him in his maqam, his station. So the Prophet ﷺ's own teacher was not as great as the student, and that's also the case for Imam al-Ghazali, who many of his teachers turned out to be that he was far greater than them in terms of his knowledge and what he ended up accomplishing. So Sidi Ahmed Zarruq is, and he's part of the madrasa of Imam al-Ghazali. He quotes him extensively. He was very well versed in his works. He was originally from Fas, and he was born into a impoverished family. He was an orphan. His mother died in his childhood, and he was raised by his grandmother al-Baneen. And his grandmother was a very righteous lady and raised him in a very interesting way. She would do things like, he mentioned this in his Kunnash, and that she would do things like hide food, and then when he would come home from the madrasa hungry, she would say, let's make a dua, and because there's no food in the house, and ask Allah to put some food somewhere in the house for us. And then they would make the dua, and then she would say, let's look and see if we can find it, and then he'd find it and just say, Subhanallah. And he said that he realized later that she was teaching him to trust in Allah and inculcating in his heart that love of Allah. And because he realized later, he said it was from God. Even though she had put it there, it was from God. So that was the training that he was given. And then he went out to learn a trade. She sent him to learn how to be a cobbler, to make the bulgha. And he was so brilliant that he began to excel in studies, and he was at the Qarawiyin, and he became a teacher. And then his character was a little harsh in his character, and he was very staunch about what was right. And so he ended up having a very serious falling out with the fuqaha in Fez over he defended the Jews in Fez, and it was during the transition from the Bani Marine to the Watasiyah, and he ended up supporting the Jews in Fez over some of the Al-Warghiyali, who was one of the fuqaha, he was the imam of the Qarawiyyin, gave a fatwa permitting taking their property because they'd broken their dhimma ahad with him, but he did not side with him, and they ended up accusing him of being Jewish. He had blue eyes, and that was obviously evidence. So he ended up having to flee, and he left, and he went on his rihla, and he ended up studying in Egypt. He studied with Imam al-Sakhawi. He went to Mecca, studied with some of the great scholars there in Medina, went back to Egypt, and then he took, his sheikh was Abu Abbas al-Hadrami. He had other shuyukh, but Abu Abbas al-Hadrami is really the sheikh that he had his opening with. And then he ended up going to Libya, and as the story has it, some brigands actually tried to rob his caravan, and they ended up, because of a karama from him, a miracle that they saw from him, they ended up making tawbah with him, and he ended up settling in Misrata, which, as you know, was recently just under siege in Libya. It's a city went through an incredible pounding. A lot of people died. But he's buried there, and his Zawiya Zarruqiyya was there. And then the Zarruqiyya became, the Watasiyya adopted it as a kind of official tariqah in Morocco. And traditionally the Moroccan rulers have had a Sufi tariqah. So for instance, King Mudir Hassan's, his minister was a Tijani. And so the Tijaniya had their authority then, and the current minister is a Bushishi. And so the influence of tariqah has been very strong in Morocco historically. So what I want to talk a little bit about, because it's an important issue and it'll come up again and again in your lives as Muslims, is the problem of tasawwuf and the problem of turuq and just a lot of confusion surrounding this issue that people have. If we look at the Ihya, and if we look at Imam al-Ghazali, he is clearly arguing that the Sufis are the people of truth. I mean, he's making that argument. He's saying, I looked for the truth in everything. I looked for it in esotericism. I looked for it with the philosophers. I looked for it with the mutakallimun, the theologians. I looked for it in the pursuit of this outward knowledge. And he mastered each of these different areas, but he said in the end, I realized it was the Sufis. Because I realized that the truth is really about experience. It's about dhawq. It's not about something rational. It's about something that transcends the rational. And that experience can only be obtained by purifying the heart. And he argues in the Ajaib al-Qalb that the heart is a mirror. And the heart needs polishing. Now the Prophet ﷺ said, كُلُّ شَيْءٍ يَصْدَى وَإِنَّمَا الْقَلْبُ يَصْدَى. Everything corrodes or oxidizes, including the heart. And the polishing of the heart is dhikrullah. So the Prophet ﷺ said that dhikr was a way to polish the heart. But why would he use that metaphor of saqala, of polishing the heart? Because we polish mirrors in order to get a reflection from them. Even the silver, and when people polish these things, it's to get a reflection. So what is it that the heart reflects? And this is what Imam al-Ghazali is concerned with. So he argues that the Sufi path is the superior path of knowledge. Now, historically, the Muslims understood Islam to be four things based on the hadith in Jibreel. The first is this outward aspect of Islam, because Jibreel, in the famous hadith in which طَلَعَ عَلَيْنَا رَجُلٌ شديد بياض الثياب شديد السواد الشعري, he came out ولا يرى عليه أثر السفر. So it's a hadith, it's famous Sahih hadith that Umar radiallahu anhu relates. Jibreel appears, he's wearing a very, very piercing white robe, he's got very black hair. There's no trace of traveling on him, even though he's a stranger in Medina, they didn't know who he was. He should have had the appearance of a traveler. And he sits down, فَأَسْنَدَ رُكْبَتَيْهِ إِلَى رُكْبَتَيْهِ. He puts his knees up against the Prophet's knees, وَوَضَعَ كَفَّيْهِ عَلَى فَخِذَيْهِ. And he puts his hands on either his thighs or the Prophet's thighs. There's two different opinions on that. Probably on his own, they say it's hay'atul talib, the way a student sits. And then he says, أخبرني عن الإسلام, tell me about Islam. And the Prophet ﷺ says, he tells him that Islam is to testify there's no God but Allah. He gives him the 5 pillars, and then he says, صدقت فعجبنا له يسأله ويصدقه. We were amazed